Okay, I think we'll get started. If you're coming from the GNL project, I encourage you to look at the introductory video for this course to make sure this is the right video for you. Otherwise, we'll start our first lecture of the semester here, talking about waves. And we'll see here that waves are equally important to particles, which we've been studying a lot the first semester, but there's some fundamentally different properties. And so we're going to round out kind of our understanding of the types of things we work with in physics here, particles and waves, before we get into talking about the main thrust of the course, which will be electrostatics and magnetics. Okay, so let's talk about this traveling wave here. And so what we're going to imagine here is that, let's imagine a wall here. I've got a string or a rope that I'm holding on, and I'm just going to give it one pulse. If you're just from being alive for as long as you have, you probably know what's going to happen here. I give it a pulse. That pulse is going to travel down that string. So the pulse is the wave traveling, and what it's traveling on, the string, is something called the medium. Now, most waves need a medium in which to propagate through. So if we're talking about the string, it's the string. If we're talking about waves on water, then water is the medium. And sound waves, you're able to hear me give this lecture because a sound wave is propagating between here and, I guess, just the microphone here on my chest. That's being picked up then because it's able to propagate through that medium of air. Now, there's an exception to that, and that is electromagnetic radiation, which is super important, otherwise known as light oftentimes. We'll see here that can propagate freely in a vacuum, which is fundamentally different than other types of waves. Okay, so one of the main questions is, what is this wave doing? Now, for this type of a situation, this single pulse, it actually is behaving a lot like a particle, and we can talk about things that like we have with particles, like its velocity, its position, that sort of thing. So one of the questions we might ask here is, how fast is this traveling down this string, or how fast is it propagating, as it's called? Okay, well, there's a couple of things that maybe you might anticipate. One of the things is it's going to matter what kind of rope we have. So if we have a light rope like a fishing line or something versus a big heavy rope like a battle rope for training or a ship rope or something like that, that's going to affect the speed. So what the rope is going to affect the speed. And then this might be a little less intuitive, but those of you who've played stringed instruments probably will be very intuitive. And that is, it's going to matter how strongly we're pulling on that string. So what kind of tension are we imparting on that string? So given a single string with its own physical characteristics, how strong are we pulling on it? How much tension are we giving that? If we give it more tension, the wave will propagate faster. If we give it less tension, the wave will propagate more slowly. Well, let's talk about this physical characteristic. And the main thing is the linear density. So how heavy is it? What's its mass per unit length? So what's its kilograms per meter? So a thick, dense, heavy rope will have a larger mu here, larger linear density, and a lighter rope will have a smaller linear density. Now, the velocity, very simple formula. So the velocity of the string will be the tension which we apply divided by the linear density. So that big, heavy battle rope compared to a light fishing line, the wave's going to propagate more slowly. But how? This is not immediately intuitive, but it does so as the square root. So the velocity is the square root of the tension divided by the linear density. Let's do a very quick example. Let's say we've got a light rope that has a linear density of 10 grams per meter, and we're going to put a tension of 100 newtons, then our velocity would be 100 divided by 0.01 kilograms. Got to convert to kilograms here. Square root, and we get 100 there. Okay, meters per second. All right. Well, these waves can have very complicated pulse shapes, and in general, they can have pretty much any shape. And so let's look at a very special type of wave, and that is if I would go up and down in a very regular cosinusoidal or sinusoidal motion here. So instead of just snapping a pulse, I'm going to attach it to a motor that's going around and lifting the string up and down in a very regular sinusoidal or cosinusoidal pattern. And these are called cosinusoidal waves or sinusoidal waves, kind of the same thing. Notice now, for any wave, even the one we're looking at here, we can talk about its displacement in the z direction, up and down here, as a function of position. Where is it on the rope, right? Is it close to the wall? Is it far away from the wall? And then as a function of time, because that wave is moving, the way the rope looks to us is changing. And so we track the amplitude of the, we trap the height of the rope as a function of position and time. So let's draw two different graphs here. This is going to be z versus x. Right? We've got two things to look at. We could look at a 3D graph, but it's easier to just take these kind of slices. So we're going to look at z versus x. So what you imagine here is that we have taken a snapshot of the rope. So don't let the rope move. Just say it's going. We've got this. It's been going for a while. Then we're just going to take a snapshot. And the particular snapshot we've taken is in blue here, and we get this cosinusoidal, or in this case sinusoidal pattern, and we can identify the characteristic of that as how far it is from trough to trough. Peak to peak here, trough to trough or peak to peak, whatever. Any identical points on the wave. This is called the wavelength. Right? And so we take a snapshot. We can walk from here to here, or measure from here to here, and figure out that length. So that is one characteristic of these sinusoidal, these very special types of waves. Now let's plot it versus time. So now what we're doing is you're going to look at one spot on that rope. So let's say we've got this rope and we put a little string on it, or paint it with a fluorescent paint or something, and then we'll watch that spot as time goes on. So we're not going to look at any of the rest of the rope, just one spot on that rope. And when we do that, we get a sinusoidal pattern as well, up and down. Now, I happen to draw these very similar to each other. The phase, how they're shifted from one another, that's just kind of arbitrary of where I started to draw the picture. Because these are different axes. This is time, and this is space. Okay, well, we can look at peak to peak again, and now we're covering a interval of time, and that interval is something we talked about last semester with circular motion, and that is the period. So we've got two t's running around here. We've got period, which we used the symbol t for, and we also have tension. So we have to be very careful here. I'm going to put these little hooks on try to remember to put hooks on the t for the period here. Okay, well, what is the function? Well, it's a function of two independent variables. I've got them color-coded here in blue and in green. So there's some amplitude. So this is simply how much displacement in the maximum throw of this motor that we're attached to. How far is it swinging that string? And that's called the amplitude. And then we're cosinusoidal. And then there's this 2 pi that's sitting there to go from say a linear frequency convert between the linear frequency and the circular frequency, which we talked about last semester. Just this 2 pi that's always hanging out. And so we see here a 2 pi ft, right? We've already seen that before for circular motion. But we have, in addition here, this position. So we can see inside the cosine, we have a position variable and the time variable. And then finally, we have the phase here. And that just shifts it this way. So if you remember back from high school trig, you can change this cosine all the way into a sine just by shifting this 90 degrees. Okay, well, the propagation velocity, how fast is this moving? And so by moving, it's a little harder to see here because with this pulse, it was very clear. It was behaving almost like a particle. This is not behaving so much like a particle. Now it's spread out over all of space. But what we're imagining here, maybe probably the best thing to imagine is a surfer riding a wave. So it looks like all these waves, but where is this wave? This wave is moving forward as the trough is coming behind, and then the next peak is coming along. So as we look at it, it just looks like the water's going up and down, but the wave itself is propagating, say, towards the shore, which if the surfer is riding that wave and kind of staying somewhat in the same position of that wave, then they're being pushed forward. So that's the propagation velocity. And this has a very simple relationship that connects the time and the space behavior. And that is the velocity is given by the wavelength times the frequency. And notice the units here. This is a distance, right? And the frequency, this is a time here. Frequency is 1 over the period. So this is a distance, and this is a 1 over second. So this is meters per second, for example. Or we can cast it, of course, as the wavelength divided by the period. So if we know the wavelength and the period, or the wavelength and the frequency, then we know the velocity of travel. Or if we know the velocity of travel and the wavelength, then we know the frequency. So these are all connected together. All right, we'll finish here now with a very, very important concept. This concept of superposition. So this is something we'll run into here with waves, something we'll run into with fields when we talk about an electric field or a magnetic field. So this is going to be critically important throughout this whole semester, and we haven't even seen it. We didn't see it in the first semester, and that's because the particles that we were worried about cannot superimpose. And what does superimpose mean? So you put one on top of the other, and a little more technical here, you put one on top of each other and they add together. So their amplitudes add. These, we know that if particles were to come together, they would collide, right? You can't put one on top of the other and make a bigger particle. So this is not true with waves. So waves can, in fact, superimpose. And so if we have a wave 1 and a wave 2 and a wave 3 and a wave 4 and a wave 5 and so on, then the total wave is just the simple addition of those. And it's really great for our ability to calculate things in physics that the superposition principle applies, because we can, if we know the component waves, we can figure out the total wave, and that's really important. Well, let's look at this from the perspective now of two waves coming at each other. So let's say I'm over here on this side and you're over here on this side, and I'm going to do a down and up motion and snap a wave that looks like this, a pulse that looks like this, going your direction, and you're just going to do an up and down motion, which will snap a pulse that will go in this direction. Now, if we were to both throw two baseballs at each other, those baseballs would collide somewhere in the middle and bounce off according to collision of particles. Let's see what happens under the idea of superposition as these guys come together. So this is going to be moving this way, this is going to be moving this way. Now, initially, this peak is going to first run into the trough of this pulse. And so let me trace out here. This is this part. It's moved forward a bit, and this has moved this way. And so this dash bit down here is this part, and this dash bit is this part, but the string doesn't split in half and do that. Of course, the string is just the addition of these two. And although not perfectly drawn here, you could imagine a point in time where this peak is exactly canceling out this trough, and we get what looks like just a single peak for this very instant, just a single peak moving in this direction. But just an instant later, this has moved on a bit, this one, and this one has moved this way. So now the leading trough is in the clear, and this pulse is now on top of this part of the pulse. And so we have these two component bits that are then adding together in a way that creates a larger pulse. So for an instant in time here, we get this asymmetric pulse here where the peak is much bigger than the trough. And then a bit later, they have cleared each other, and your pulse that you sent is heading off this way, and my pulse is heading off this way, looking exactly the same as they did originally, just further on down the line. Now, we'll talk much more about this, but here we see that the two waves are fighting each other. One wave wants to make a trough, one wave wants to make a peak. So we call that a destructive interference. They're working in opposition. Here, we call this a constructive interference between the two waves. Okay, so that's the idea of superposition. So we've got a few formula to get down and practice with, and then keep telling yourself the story of this principle of superposition. Right now, fairly easy, but it's going to build upon itself as we get to different things like I mentioned, fields of electric fields and magnetic fields.